Welcome back to Eyewitness News this morning. If you have a legal question that you would like to have answered, give us a call right now. The number is 436-1212. We have Charley O'Hara here in the studio to answer those legal questions. Charley, I wanted to ask you something about, there are a couple of cases that have been happening recently. We've talked about them on our show all morning. The case of, what is the difference, I guess, is the question, between pleading no contest, which is what we've seen, and also pleading guilty to charges. What are the differences there, and what do they entail?
Well, actually, no contest means that you do not contest the charge.
Okay.
And that means I'm not saying I did it. I'm not saying I didn't do it. I'm just not going to contest it. What they say happened, I'm not going to argue about or anything like that. Usually the reason you do that is actually not necessarily because you're not guilty, but a no contest plea cannot be used against you if you're sued civilly. In other words, if they file a lawsuit against you to recover money, a no contest plea, they still have to go prove the case. So you're basically throwing yourself on the mercy of the court. You're basically saying, if here's what they're going to say what happened, and I'm not arguing with it, so it's a no contest plea. You're not admitting guilt. On a guilty plea, you're saying, I did do what they say I did, and I admit I did that, and I'm saying what I did, and this is what and so then they could use that in a civil case because you said I did what they say I did. So
and also
with
pleading guilty too, that affects other things too, like any sort of recourse you might have down the road, like no appeals.
Well, I don't, it does, but both pleas would have the same effect, at least in Kansas, are going to have the same effect that way, because a no contest plea, as long as it's every plea has to be voluntary. You have to know what you're doing. You have to understand the system. You have to understand what will happen to you by doing that. So as long as you do that, those pleas, either one, are going to be the same. It isn't going to affect the appeal either way.
Now, in this most recent case, we're talking about Kurt Mitchell and Tanya Tandoc. He recently changed his plea to guilty. He's changed it, saying he is guilty of what happened, and it's happened very quickly. We've said in our stories this morning that both the judges and lawyers are asking him multiple times, are you sure? Why is that such an odd thing to happen in a case?
Well, we want people knowing what they're doing, especially when they're pleading guilty to a crime that's going to keep them in prison for the rest of their life, which is what that's going to do. And so we want to make sure they understand and they're clear in their minds and they understand everything so we can put this thing to rest. And I guess what strikes me is when someone within 2 weeks or so enters a plea like that in that big a case, you wonder, number one, do the attorneys know everything and all the evidence? Is there some legal defense? I mean, we discussed, at least at times, that he even in his audio, I think, said something about heat of passion and different things. Now, that may not have applied, but at least they should have looked at it and should have looked at all the evidence. It appears that he was quite emotional, and I know the judge did what he was supposed to, and the attorneys did what they were supposed to, but all the attorneys and judges are always worried when someone reacts emotionally rather than rationally.
Okay, we do have one call on the line right now. Go ahead now with your question for Charley. Caller, if you're there, go ahead with your question.
I had my father. Hi, I just had my father just passed. And he left a will, and on this will, it had a time period of where people are supposed to get paid. Now, if this time elapses and you still haven't received the money, what can somebody do about that?
All right, well, you can go through probate. People usually wait when someone passes to get paid until all the money's been dispersed.
All right, we're back right after this.